When we break down substrate that's already been exhausted, we have a very amazing opportunity because it's chitin. And when you break it down, it takes chitinase. And the amazing thing about all this stuff, like when you make that like compost heap or when you break down this stuff, it's like, where's the thermophiles, coming from? It's like they literally like appear. When the heat gets the temperature, they're there. And then as it goes down the temperature, other things inoculate it. And it's like, how does this all happen? And it might be something similar to the way that ciliates and cysts, I don't know. But I'm really fascinated, and if anyone wants to add any understanding that they might have to that, I would love to know. Yeah, I'm winking at you. But like the crazy thing is, in breaking down this, we suddenly have this amazing opportunity. All the farmers, all the gardeners, the number one thing they're having trouble with is their fungi. They don't have the protective fungi in place, and so they get powdery mildew. So they get all these things happening. And so, and chitinase, right, it's going to be digesting that fungi in place, that powdery mildew, or your insects, because they're chitin-based too. Your pests are chitin-based. So you could be using that to digest them, but then you're going to want to follow that up with, IMOs, inoculating with, what's actually there and beneficial and ramping that indigenous protection up. So, but you need to break it down first. So, no, you would need to break it down. Like you would need to take that substrate and you would need to break it down through the digestion of the gut of a worm, or through the process of thermophilic decomposition. And so when these things are broken down, because it's chitin-based, it requires something that consumes chitin to break it down into carbon chains to create that sticky, compost goodness that we all love. So it's really, really powerful, because then we can take that compost and then make compost teas. And then we can spray it on the plant, protect the plant, digest the problem. And then you can follow up with your IMO and hit that, or your compost tea made with all these awesome indigenous things, and then spray it on, or you know what I mean? But we always have to remember that the reason that the protection wasn't there in the first place isn't fixed by you just digesting it. And that's all I wanted to say. And even before you would even have that problem happen, if you had those defenses in place, they wouldn't have any place to get in. So it's really, really incredible when you actually have that kind of thing happening regularly, when you have the pollinators there, when you have the fungi there, when you have all those elements together. It creates that orchestra that permaculture really, promotes. I mean, it is that orchestration, and that is fungi in the middle of it directing, you know what I mean? So anything that you have that's a waste substrate, whether it's a substrate that's been myceliated or whether it's your macadamia nut hulls like Chris Trump, if you take that waste and you use it to create the IMO prep, there's a whole series of preps that you can do depending on what you have. I mean, certain ones you have like wet, like highly nitrogenous, like really stinky stuff. It works best with like IMO 5, I think is the one. But basically, it's a way to take that waste and inoculate it with the indigenous mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria, I would imagine, because it's all open. None of it's amazing when you start studying Korean natural farming, because just the basic IMO 1 through 5, it reads like Peter's book, but without any lab. It's all like, instead of in the jar in the sterile field, it's all just on the ground right in front of you. So yeah, you could totally use the substrate. I wonder though, wow, that's so cool. Because that would be both, wouldn't it? Well, no, you would get the chitinase, but you would get like indigenous chitinase. And with the consortium, because it's all open, so that would be like incredibly cool. That's awesome, I love that, thank you. Yeah, and so this is the kind of thing that needs to happen, and this is why I try to design my courses and everything to be as lateral as possible, because it's only through discussion and positing new ideas and being in a safe learning space like here at the Radical Mycology Convergence, right? It's so amazing. I've been to a lot of these kinds of things, and nothing is like it with the kind of safe space for learning feeling that we have here. So, yeah. Just want to honor that for a moment. And then, of course, there's trichoderma, which is really well known for composting. And people are actually, cultivating it using like coffee grounds. So if you were like going to do the whole oyster growing on coffee grounds, and then you let it go too long, and you opened it up, and it's like bright green, you did it. So, and then you would add that to your compost heap, and that's exactly what you would do anyway in your mind, because you're like, well, I can't use this, someone just put it in the compost heap. It's pretty amazing how the fungi knows exactly what you will do. It's cultivating. Yeah, it's called, oh boy, I love the botany of desire. I wish, the botany, like the fungi of desire or something, the mycelium of desire. Oh, I want to read that. Woo! Okay. All right, we're recording, so we will remember that. I might have to write another book.
You got a couple months left in this year.
I have 3 other books I have to finish before the end of the year. So we'll get there. So yeah, use substrate. These blocks can actually be used medicinally. So we could be putting this with the fruit too in a blender with water and a little bit of oil, and then doing like the nut milk thing where you're extracting it, and that breaks down those cell walls and allows all those beneficials that you could be getting through alcohol release, you can get through heat release, but then you don't lose all the ones that you lost through heat release. And so this is actually, well, what I'm talking about, mushroom milk, which is also in my book, is based on this patent where they have case studies where they've had people with MS, people with FARS, people with Parkinson's, people with post-traumatic stress disorder, people with depression, anxiety, all this stuff. And there's other things. Oh, I think Lou Gehrig's. There's a bunch of different ones in there, and you can the website's in the workbook, and it's also online. You can look it up. But Peter's the one who showed it to me. And so it's a very potent medicine, extremely potent medicine. And it's something anyone can do with a blender. And so when we look at these used substrates, we tend to see them as like waste. And that's why you have all these people who turn like their substrate into compost and then sell that as dirt for cheap, like $5, like a pickup truck bed full. But the reality is this is still medicine. And this is still like, I mean, there's so many problems it can solve, like with the chitinase, with like the compost, with the Korean natural farming. So if you know people, and there are people here, who already have this as a waste product, but their hands are full, because most of us who start these businesses get our hands way full really fast, you could suddenly be like, well, let me make this into a business. And then it can be something that creates a model for people everywhere to start adopting. So in combating insect and pests, mold, and more. And then, right, I got excited and talked about all this. So compost tea, you're just putting it into a bag, you're aerating it. You usually do the same amount of air per water, and they say that on there because they're aquarium based. And then most arthropods are chitin based, as are molds and mildews. So can we use this around the house? Yeah. What's it gonna hurt? It's soil. It's soil life. It's not gonna hurt anything. So yeah, and like if you've got like a teepee like mine, that mildews and molds, up in here, this is a great solution. It's a really gentle solution. And then in processing waste, and of course I put quotes around waste because there is no waste. Everything's a gift to the next stage in the cycle, right?
Resource.
Yeah, and then how many people in the past year have seen someone just burning their leaves or organic matter? It's like all of that is opportunity for like a mycological conversation and like showing them what's possible, making them feel empowered and having them create instead of just do the quick and easy answer. And then in remediation, so do we know where our straw is coming from and how it was dried down? A lot of the grain and a lot of the straw is sprayed with glyphosate to dry it down quickly. They desiccate it. And so the good news is if you're training your fungi to eat that stuff and then you're having it right as the water enters your site, you could be having that fungi eat those things and embody them as they're coming in. That's why he's feeding those fungi oil, right? So that they can actually attack that. But we have to think about our wood chips. I mean, people do chip drop all the time. I get like chip and tarp drop. It's like they threw the tarps like into the chipper. And it's like you get like little bits of confetti and it's not cool at all. So yeah, it's like, okay, chip pile, you are now a remediation pile. Yeah. So yeah, King Stropharia mushroom does a good job of this, but this is just like these are forerunners. All these mushrooms that we know and all these fungi that we know, these are really just foreigners. They're the people that are just arrived to just tell us like what's possible. And there are many other native fungi that we can't eat. I mean, this is one we eat, you know, and that's particularly why we favor it, and that's probably why there's been so much research on it. But there, like I said, there's so many, and they all do different things. It's like people talk about dynamic accumulators in like permaculture, but the reality is everything accumulates, and you put it in a certain context with a certain fungi, and it really accumulates. And so this whole idea of like, oh no, well that plant takes in this quantification of nitrogen per season, per this amount of soil, it's like, no, nothing works that way. So yeah, it's just really humbling when you start really diving into this and understanding the complexity. So in construction, like we talked about those reishi blocks, I mean, you could break your hand trying to like damage one of those. They're really, really tough, and people are making furniture out of them. People are doing all sorts of stuff. But then it's all about, as Peter likes to say, keeping out the moisture, right? Can't let it get wet. But I've talked to him about if there is a way to like isolate the chitin and make it into a shellac, then we could just cover it with like a chitin shellac, and it would be a fungal sealing on. Yeah. So anyway. Yeah, and so in medicine, of course, lion's mane. Love you. This is it in vodka. You can do it with that. What's the really strong alcohol one? Everclear. You can do it with that too. But then we do the double extract, and so we're taking the mark with a C. I'm remembering now, and you boil it and make basically a tea out of that, and then you combine the two, and it's very simple, easy medicine. You're just doing this 6 weeks, shaking it every day, and so this is something everyone can do, something that's super easy, and then you can definitely do the same exact thing with the mycelial mass too. This is just making tincture. And so, yeah, you just would soak it in alcohol and it would take all that out, and then you would take it out of the alcohol and strain it and put it into water and boil it and make a tea, and then cook it down until it's half the amount of water that you started with, and then add those two together, and then you've watered down your vodka. So it's less intense. And yeah, and so it's just so simple and easy. And my wife gets, how many of you have headaches that painkillers and all the pill things don't touch? What does that mean? Like what's going on fundamentally there? Well, there's inflammation that those modalities can't touch. And so for my wife, she takes this and it instantly hits that. And it's not the alcohol, it's watered down. She's not taking very much, but it instantly hits that. And so and I know for her it's probably because of the radiation, but let me quickly tell you about how they administer the radiation. And this is freaky. So my wife's in a room, no suit. Someone in a suit comes in with a giant box and puts the box down and opens the box and runs away in a suit. And my wife now has to open the inner box and take the pill and eat it. And that's what ate her thyroid. And she had to suck on lemons for constantly for weeks because it would have eaten her salivary glands too, on top of her thyroid. So she removed all the enamel from her teeth that way, and she hated lemons for a long time. Now, you're radioactive. In the 70s and maybe in the 80s, they would keep you in a hospital in a separate wing. When my wife did it, all the other people there were on Medicare and everything. They're all older and they're all taking public transportation. Your garbage when you're radioactive for 6 months goes in separate bags that don't go to the actual dump until the 6 months is over. When you flush the toilet, you flush 3 times. And if by chance your radioactive material does reach the actual landfill, they will scan it and they will know that the isotope actually is yours. And they will call the doctor and you will get in serious trouble. And they told my wife all this. And they take public transit home and everything you touch, the sweat, stays radioactive for 3 to 6 months. And we were sending all these little old ladies home. It's beaming with energy. Not good energy, and sitting on those transits, touching everything, and then living their lives radioactive. My wife we had on the 3rd floor where I grew up. So yeah. We've all probably been exposed to dangerous forms of radiation, and we're all probably in different stages of healing and reaction, and all different sorts of things are going on around us that we did not consent to. And it's we talk about Flint and the water and all that. It's Fresno's water had much higher lead levels, but that never made the news because, for whatever reason. Yeah, there's so many stories that need to be told. So I just wanted to put that out there. So regardless of how you feel I shouldn't have this sickness, I shouldn't have this, or we all are dealing with so much. So give yourself that space and then dive into healing if you need to. Yeah, and then mushroom milk, we talked about that. So everywhere permaculture goes, fungi is already there. And actually, it feels almost like fungi is the perfect expression of permaculture, or of the permaculture ethics, of the permaculture principles. And so, permaculture really became permanent culture. I know it was permanent agriculture originally, right? J. Russell Smith, all those, right? But the reality is that mycoculture is mycologically rooted culture, and they're one and the same when you're accurately looking at them each. And it's we just derived the same conclusion or holistic picture. I mean, if you travel on different roads to the holistic picture, they're going to arrive in the same space. Mycophilia, biophilia is only through the passion and that deep care that we're going to be able to really have this inoculate everyone. It has to inoculate to the deepest part of the heart. And so we need to be like mycelium. And mycelium, when I really look at mycelium, I see it as our best selves. I see it as the way that our society could be, the way that we individually could be. And as an educator, I mean, being a facilitator is the highest form of being an educator, because the highest form of being a student is asking your own questions and then being guided as you explore those ideas and come into your own. So mycelium, the micro-consent, right? Have you guys read that section in Peter's book? Okay. So like I said, the plants put out the exudates, they put out cakes and cookies. It's primarily, sugars from photosynthesis. And they're putting those out in an invitation. And then the bacteria and fungi are coming over to eat that stuff and have that conversation. And the plant invites them inside of them. And they partner, and they become one organism, really. I mean, we're all many organisms, right? And so that's what we really need to do is be so open that we can be vulnerable enough to interface with people on such a deep level that we can really facilitate who they really are. And in doing that, like as an educator, that's like the greatest gift I can give, is to be able to empower those around me to be their best selves. And so I strive to be like mycelium, and that is to grow in tandem with ecosystem maturity and stability too. So as we look at systems and we look at that chart, is the chart here? Yeah, the chart's there. All right. And we look at this chart, as we go into the old growth, we get more fungi. As we go into the old growth, we have more stability. We have that long-term sequestration. We have more life. I mean, over here, the disturbance, yeah, it takes fungi to get it started up, but fungi is not as abundant. And then you end up in the fungal abundance. So I truly believe, as we, in our culture, adopt fungi and the modalities of fungi deeper in and diversify and have that stability that fungi offers, we will find more stability in our culture, in our social culture, in our food, or all of it. We're going to have that holistic change, because everywhere we look holistically, we find fungi already there. And then we need to grow like mycorrhizal fungi. So we need to facilitate the growth and succession of all biodiversity and the future generations of fungi. And when I say future generations of fungi, I mean the animals, the people, all the plants. It's all connected. We're all expressions of that fungal base. We're all really expressions of the soil. I mean, we're this thin layer on top of the skin of the earth, between the sky and the earth, and we are the expression of the relationship between them. And that's why we're made of air. We're all made of air too, as we're made with the soil. Yeah.